actor Timothy Busfield is back in a New Mexico courtroom for a detention hearing. He's accused of inappropriately touching two child actors on the set of The Cleaning Lady, which was filmed in that state.
Hollywood has never seen a story quite like this. Timothy Busfield, the Emmy-winning actor and respected director whose face had graced screens from 30-something to Field of Dreams, now faces the harsh glare of the public eye.
I'm going to confront these lies. They're horrible. They're all lies. And I did not do anything to those little boys. And I'm going to fight it. I'm going to fight it with a great team.
At the center of a criminal case in New Mexico, his freedom, reputation, and career hang in the balance. By his side, 61-year-old Little House on the Prairie icon, Melissa Gilbert, has broken her silence in court. This is a tale of love, loyalty, and looming consequences. And it goes back decades. Beginnings in the spotlight. Timothy Busfield, now 68, was born in Michigan, but forged his identity on stages and screens across the country. He carved a name for himself early on in the 1980s as an actor with range and quiet intensity, from Broadway's Brighton Beach Memoirs, as Matthew Broderick's understudy in 1982, to the wide-reaching pop culture footprint of Revenge of the Nerds in 1984. He played roles that blended earnestness with depth, and he did not stop at acting. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Busfield had won acclaim in television dramas and even earned an Emmy Award in 1991 for his role on 30-something, a series that became a defining look at adult life in America. He went on to appear in films like Field of Dreams and spiraled into roles behind the camera as well, directing episodes across network television and building his own theatrical legacy with the B Street Theater in Sacramento, which he co-founded with his brother. Melissa Gilbert's story began even earlier. Born in Los Angeles on May 8, 1964, she became a familiar face to America as a child, the girl who would become Laura Ingalls Wilder, the heart of Little House on the Prairie. She famously beat out more than 500 other young actresses to secure this role, which would define her early career and embed her in the collective nostalgia of a generation of viewers. Little House ran through the 1970s into the early 1980s, and Gilbert's life became intertwined with the character who grew up on that prairie. She transitioned through adulthood with a mix of television roles, theater, reality TV, authorship, and even leadership, serving as president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2001 to 2005. Her first marriage to actor Bo Brinkman in 1988 ended after 4 years, a period she later described as formative but turbulent. In 1995, she married Bruce Boxleitner, the sci-fi and television star with whom she had 2 children, Michael and Meredith. That marriage lasted until 2011, leaving her a mother and a woman familiar with the delicate balancing act between family, fame, and personal identity. Meanwhile, Busfield's first marriage to Radha Delamarter in 1984 produced children and a household infused with the intensity of a career in theater and television. That marriage ended in 1994, followed by a second marriage to Jennifer Merwin in 1996, which also eventually dissolved. It was in the quiet aftermath of these chapters that their paths crossed. The Hollywood circuits they frequented, industry events, theater premieres, and collaborative sets brought them together first in passing, as colleagues and mutual admirers. In the wake of their previous marriages, both had developed a deeper understanding of what it meant to balance love with independence, career with family, and public life with private sanctuary. Their connection deepened in 2012, almost like fate intervening when neither was looking. Busfield, newly single and engaged in directing, and Gilbert, recently divorced and navigating motherhood and career, found themselves drawn to one another in a way that transcended professional respect. Their friendship turned into a courtship. By the time their relationship was first reported publicly in 2013, it seemed a melding of two storied careers. They married on April 24, 2013, at the storied San Isidro Ranch in Santa Barbara, California, a venue known for its sweeping gardens, historic cottages, and discreet charm. Friends and family gathered quietly, witnessing a union that felt both timeless and cinematic, as if the culmination of decades in the industry had led to this single radiant moment. Their lives quickly intertwined, not just personally, but creatively. They made homes together, first in Howell, Michigan, embracing quiet Midwestern life, and later in New York. Together, they produced and worked on the film Guest Artist, a story that highlighted the very creative passion that had first drawn them together, and launched Grand River Productions, a company designed to nurture independent projects and offer mentorship to emerging talent. Publicly, they maintained a careful balance between celebrity visibility and personal privacy. Gilbert, ever conscious of her iconic status from Little House on the Prairie, occasionally appeared in interviews, charity events, and award ceremonies alongside Busfield, who himself continued to direct and act, earning acclaim on shows like The West Wing and movies like Field of Dreams. Their presence on the red carpet, in theater circles, and in philanthropic circles projected an image of a Hollywood couple grounded in decades of professional success and personal resilience. For the public, the contrast was magnetic. He was a seasoned actor and director whose performances carried both gravitas and charm. She was an enduring screen presence whose name evoked nostalgia and connection for generations. Their shared life became a story of complementary careers spanning television and film. The dream was steady. But beneath the laughter of premieres and quiet evenings at home, a new chapter was unfolding. The shadowed set. When a director steps onto a set, the entire production shifts. The actors, the crew, the rhythm of light and sound all bend toward his vision. That was Timothy Busfield's domain for much of the early 2010s. After decades of acting, from 30-something and The West Wing to films like Field of Dreams, Busfield had established himself not just in front of the camera, but behind it. With an Emmy Award marking his past as a performer, he pivoted into directing and producing, shaping stories as much as inhabiting them. One of his most recent chapters, before headlines splashed across news feeds, began in 2022, when Busfield joined the creative team of The Cleaning Lady, a Fox television series filmed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The crime drama, starring Elodie Young, ran for 4 seasons and filmed many of its scenes in the high desert surroundings of the Southwest. Busfield directed a number of episodes and also served as an executive producer. On a TV show set, especially one involving younger actors, authority isn't just a matter of call sheets and camera angles. Directors shape the environment. They define moments that demand professionalism, discipline, and trust. Child actors are watched over by guardians, set supervisors, and production staff precisely because the power dynamics on a set can be intense. Adults guide scenes, give direction, and foster the comfort necessary for performance. To colleagues and crew, Busfield's role was that of the veteran filmmaker, someone accustomed to holding the megaphone, organizing a complicated machine of creativity and discipline in a place where time is always scarce and expectations always high. Sources close to the production described him as experienced and well-liked, a figure whose decades in Hollywood lent weight to his decisions and whose presence was integral to the show's last seasons. But authority on a set is double-edged. With power comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes scrutiny. What happens when the person who directs trust also attracts trust? Stories of mentorship and guidance can shade into tales of vulnerability when they involve minors. And in Hollywood, a world where reputations are fragile and perceptions can shift overnight, that tension is never far away. That tension became a headline in late 2024. In November of that year, a physician at the University of New Mexico Hospital contacted authorities in Albuquerque, prompting an investigation into events that allegedly took place on the cleaning lady set. The investigation, initiated after the doctor's report, led to the parents of two child actors telling police what they believed had occurred when their sons were younger and working on the show. By January 2026, the story had taken its most dramatic turn. A judge signed an arrest warrant for Busfield for inappropriate contact with a minor and one count of child abuse in New Mexico. The charges centered on allegations that between November 2022 and spring 2024, while Busfield was directing episodes of The Cleaning Lady, he behaved inappropriately toward the twin boys when they were 7 and 8 years old. The boys, referred to only by initials in court filings to protect their identities, told investigators that certain encounters on set made them uncomfortable. Importantly, at every step, authorities have stressed that these are allegations, claims that led to formal charges but have not been proven in court. Busfield has denied wrongdoing, released a video statement saying he did not do anything to those little boys, and has maintained his innocence while preparing for his defense. His attorneys have pushed back against the charges, citing independent investigations by studio representatives and even polygraph tests they say support his version of events. This situation struck a nerve precisely because it pits two powerful forces against each other: the trust given to someone in a position of authority on set, and the accountability demanded when serious questions arise about conduct toward those under that authority. Hollywood has long tried to grapple with these tensions, especially in an era sharply focused on safety and ethics after years of scrutiny over power imbalances and misconduct in the industry. For months leading up to the charges, life on the Albuquerque production was reportedly normal, and several cast and crew members prepared for the show's continued success. But the investigation, coming on the heels of a separate complaint by a doctor and relayed to law enforcement, shifted the atmosphere dramatically. Suddenly, routines and schedules were overshadowed by police interviews, lawyers reviewing hours of footage and documents, and a legal process that moved quickly from a confidential inquiry to public indictment. In early January 2026, he turned himself in to the Albuquerque police, as required by the warrant, and was booked on the charges. Initially, a judge ordered Busfield held without bond, citing the seriousness of the allegations and concerns raised by prosecutors about potential risk and the nature of the allegations. A detention hearing was set to determine whether he would remain in custody or could be released while awaiting trial. For the industry and the public, this is more than a legal case. It's a story about how power, reputation, and responsibility intersect. Directors like Busfield, veterans of decades in film and television, are often entrusted with mentoring young talents, guiding them through demanding schedules and emotionally challenging scenes. The tension between authority and perception grows even sharper when that trust is called into question. Whether Busfield is ultimately exonerated or held accountable remains in the hands of the court. But the drama already reshapes his legacy and puts a spotlight on how the entertainment industry manages power and protection. Allegations and arrest. Criminal contact with a minor describes conduct that goes well beyond on-set professionalism, and under New Mexico law, Each count of criminal sexual contact of a child under the age of 13 carries potential prison time. Combined with a count of child abuse, the maximum exposure could stretch into more than a decade behind bars if convictions were ever secured. Prosecutors in Bernalillo County charged Busfield based on a complaint that detailed alleged incidents occurring between November 2022 and spring 2024, while the boys were on the set of The Cleaning Lady, which filmed in Albuquerque over multiple seasons. The criminal complaint laid out a timeline that began long before the warrant ever went public. According to law enforcement filings, the investigation was triggered in November 2024 when a physician at the University of New Mexico Hospital contacted Albuquerque police after the boys' parents brought them in for treatment and expressed concerns about what might have happened on set. The parents had reportedly sought medical advice after their sons exhibited symptoms that they feared could be linked to trauma. The complaint indicates that one of the children, then as young as 7 years old at the time of the earliest alleged incident, told a social worker that Busfield had acted inappropriately with him, not once, but on multiple occasions, and was afraid to tell anyone because he thought the director might be angry at him. By early January 2026, the investigation had progressed to the point where prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to seek an arrest warrant. On January 13th, Busfield, after being notified about the warrant, turned himself in at the Metro Detention Center in Albuquerque, surrendering to police as required by the order. Footage released to media outlets showed Busfield at his attorney's office shortly before entering custody, telling reporters that he would confront these lies and asserting, "I did not do anything to those little boys," before making the roughly 2,000-mile drive from California to New Mexico. Once booked, the actor was held at the detention center in an orange jumpsuit. His first court appearance came quickly, January 14, 2026, in the 2nd Judicial District Court in Bernalillo County. Prosecutors sought to hold him without bond, citing the serious nature of the alleged offenses and what they described in filings as detailed accounts by the alleged victims and supporting medical observations. The judge initially agreed, and Busfield remained in custody as the wheels of the pretrial process began to turn. What followed was an extraordinary blur of legal filings, character statements, and public scrutiny. In the days after his arrest, Melissa Gilbert, his wife of more than a decade and the well-known former child star of Little House on the Prairie, attended court hearings, visibly emotional, present in the gallery as the case moved forward. Media outlets captured moments of both tension and tenderness. Gilbert embraced supporters outside the courthouse. Busfield's legal team argued vehemently for his release. News sites from ABC News to Rolling Stone chronicled each twist in real time. The reactions online and in the press were immediate and intense. Headlines ranged from stark legal summaries to deeply personal human interest pieces about Gilbert's support and the emotional toll the case has taken. Social media erupted with opinions, speculation, and conflicting narratives, with many expressing disbelief that a seasoned Hollywood figure could face such grave allegations, while others focused on the pain of alleged victims and the broader issue of accountability in an industry notorious for its power imbalances. His defense team did not merely deny wrongdoing, they launched their own counter-arguments with vigor. Defense attorneys claimed the allegations emerged only after the boys were no longer employed on the show, suggesting possible financial or retaliatory motives tied to the children's families. They also pointed to an independent investigation conducted by Warner Brothers Television, the studio behind The Cleaning Lady, which reportedly found no corroborating evidence supporting the allegations. In addition, Busfield submitted to a polygraph test that his attorneys say he passed. However, polygraph results are not always admissible in court. Some commentators view the case as emblematic of deeper cultural fights over how allegations involving prominent figures should be handled, while others saw it through a more personal lens, emphasizing Gilbert's role as both spouse and potential witness. Busfield's legal team also launched a very pointed attack on the credibility of the accuser's parents. They filed court documents asserting that the allegations against him were rooted not in neutral concern, but in financial motive and personal misconduct on the part of the parents of the twin boys at the center of the case. According to those filings, the parents, Ronald Rodis and Angele LaSalle, have a well-documented history of fraud and dishonesty, and their actions should be weighed heavily in assessing the credibility of their claims. Busfield's lawyers noted that Rodis, the father of the alleged victims, is a former attorney who was convicted of federal conspiracy and wire fraud and was later disbarred following that prosecution. The case stemmed from a multi-million-dollar fraudulent mortgage modification scheme in which Rodis and co-conspirators targeted struggling homeowners with false promises of legal help during the housing crisis, according to Department of Justice records. In that case, he pleaded guilty in June 2016, was sentenced to 41 months in prison, and ordered to pay nearly $4 million in restitution for deceiving vulnerable clients seeking mortgage relief. The defense also pointed to civil judgments and allegations of dishonesty against the boy's mother, LaSalle, including instances of issuing bad checks and disputes over financial behavior, as part of their broader claim that the family's integrity was compromised before the current allegations emerged. Busfield's legal team went further by asserting that the accusations arose only after the twins lost their roles on The Cleaning Lady and after consultation with civil counsel, suggesting to the court that the motivation for bringing the criminal complaint might be tied to financial gain or retaliation rather than strictly concern for the children's well-being. Defense attorney Amber Feyerberg argued that while the two boys themselves might be victims in some sense, they weren't victimized by Tim Busfield, they were victimized by their own parents, who, she said, no longer could make money as a lawyer disbarred, no longer could write bad checks, and then allegedly sought to manufacture victims as revenge. She argued that the parents' alleged past misconduct and potential motives should factor into how the court views the allegations. Prosecutors, for their part, have countered that these arguments do not diminish the substance of the accusations and have emphasized evidence gathered independently, including medical assessments and therapeutic accounts supporting the children's disclosures. But the fraud narrative has nonetheless generated its own media attention and skepticism, with commentators, legal analysts, and the public discussing not just the allegations against Busfield, but also the background of the accuser's parents and how it might influence both public perception and the legal process ahead. A pivotal moment came at a pre-trial detention hearing on January 20, 2026, when a New Mexico judge ruled that Busfield could be released from custody pending trial under strict conditions, finding that prosecutors had not clearly proven that no combination of release conditions could protect public safety. The judge ordered that he remain under the supervision of pretrial services in Albuquerque, not possess firearms or dangerous weapons, avoid controlled substances and alcohol, and have no contact with the alleged victims or their families. This ruling allowed Busfield to leave jail and return home while the legal process continued, markedly shifting the case from confinement to a high-stakes legal limbo that will unfold over months. A preliminary hearing, the next legal milestone to determine whether there is probable cause for a trial, has been scheduled. That session, expected to present evidence and testimony, will shape whether the case moves forward to a full jury trial or ends before it reaches that stage. But there's more than a legal battle at stake here. The plea of a wife. On January 16, 2026, Melissa Gilbert wrote and submitted a heart-wrenching letter to the judge overseeing her husband's case. Not a legal brief, not a rebuttal to allegations, but a raw, personal appeal that offered a window into how she saw the man facing some of the most serious charges of his life. The letter reads less like a legal argument and more like a love story under siege. Gilbert described Busfield as my love, my rock, my partner in business and life, emphasizing that she knew him better and more intimately than anything in his life ever has. She spoke of his joy, humor, and kindness, portraying him as the beating heart of their extended family and someone whose moral compass was as unwavering as his devotion to helping others. Her plea was simple, repeated with emotional force. Please, please take care of my sweet husband. As he is my protector, I am his, but I cannot protect him now. She said that more than anything, the loss of being able to protect him was truly breaking my heart. Gilbert's letter wasn't alone. By the time it was filed with the court, at least 75 handwritten or signed letters of support had been submitted on Busfield's behalf. The breadth of support was wide. It ranged from personal acquaintances who'd known Busfield since preschool and neighbors who had watched him grow up, to former co-stars from his early television work and theater colleagues, each offering a glimpse into a life and character that, in their view, sharply contradicted the allegations now facing him. Several 30-something veterans were among the most prominent voices. Actors such as Polly Draper, Peter Horton, Mel Harris, Ken Olin, Patricia Wettig Olin, and Melanie Mayron wrote to the judge describing Busfield as a consummate professional and a good man through and through. One longtime colleague recalled scenes in which Busfield, as part of an on-screen family, played tender moments with child actors decades earlier, not as distant roles, but as evidence of his ability to be present, caring, and focused in emotionally demanding situations. The letters painted a portrait of a man shaped by generosity, mentorship, and steadiness. Peter Horton's letter, for example, noted that he had known Busfield for nearly 4 decades and emphasized that Busfield's loyalty and integrity extended far beyond the camera. Another 30-something alum wrote of the way his children had personally trusted Busfield during filming, describing him as someone who gave up his ego to be present and provided complete focus and a generous heart. Family members also weighed in. Perhaps the most striking personal testimony came from Gilbert's eldest son, Michael Boxleitner, who wrote that Busfield had been my hero, a figure who had shown up in ways that, in his view, surpassed even a biological father's role. Boxleitner spoke of Busfield as a thoughtful, supportive presence who helped shape his life, and his letter highlighted the family dimension of the support Busfield enjoyed, not just professional goodwill. Gilbert's mother, Barbara Gilbert Cowan, also submitted her own letter, saying simply that the world is a better place with Timothy Busfield in it. Other letters included comments from former collaborators and crew members, each echoing similar themes. Busfield as a director who took his responsibilities seriously, someone committed to safety and professionalism on set, and someone whose generosity of spirit shaped many careers. The collective weight of these letters played a practical role in the courtroom as well. Judges in pretrial detention hearings often consider not only the severity of charges, but also a defendant's character, community ties, and potential risk. Busfield's attorneys pointed to the stack of letters, along with other evidence such as an independent studio investigation and a polygraph test they say he passed, to argue that Busfield could safely be released pending trial. Dramatically, Gilbert's plea stood out because it was about love under duress. She wrote that she was trying to balance logic and all the feelings swirling through me, detailing how difficult it had been to bring these emotions into a legal document. This was not a scripted speech or a polished deposition. It was a wife telling a judge what her husband meant to her and asking for mercy in a moment when the usual roles in their relationship had been inverted. The protector needed protection. Gilbert's public and private stance unfolded against the backdrop of a pretrial detention hearing on January 20, 2026, in Bernalillo County, New Mexico. Prosecutors had asked a judge to keep Busfield held without bond while the case moved forward, citing the seriousness of the allegations. Defense attorneys countered with character testimonies, references to independent studio investigations that found no supporting evidence, and points about Busfield's voluntary surrender to authorities earlier that month. Among the defense's strategic points was that the allegations had only come to light long after the alleged events on set. Gilbert's letter was a part of that broader defense narrative, framing Busfield not as a danger but as a husband, father, and mentor whose life's work centered on kindness. The emotional weight of the letter became even more visible in court. On the day of the hearing, Gilbert was present in the gallery, and when the judge ruled that Busfield could be released from jail pending trial under strict conditions, she was visibly overwhelmed, some reports noting tears and quiet expressions of relief. But even with his release, the legal uncertainty of what lies ahead remained stark. Busfield faces a legal process that could stretch for months, involving a status conference set for February 4, 2026, and further hearings to assess whether there is sufficient evidence to go to trial. If the case does proceed, the potential outcomes range from dismissal to conviction, and if convicted, penalties under New Mexico law could include significant fines, probation, and years in prison. The historical context of these charges, the age of the alleged victims, and the passions stirred in the public make this one of the most complex, closely watched celebrity legal cases of the year. For Gilbert, the stakes are both legal and deeply personal. However, the legal process does not operate on emotion or personal testimony alone. Courts rely on evidence, procedural rules, and the careful weighing of all parties' rights. Yet in a case as high-profile and charged as this one, the human element, the moral and emotional testimony of someone who has lived alongside the defendant, carries weight that cannot be dismissed outright. Melissa Gilbert's letter is a public declaration of faith, a full-throated statement from a spouse who knows Busfield in ways no prosecutor, journalist, or casual observer can claim. In cases involving allegations against a well-known figure, a spouse's testimony is more than sentiment. It is a rare, humanizing lens that offers the court insight into the person behind the headlines. Gilbert's words highlight the tension at the heart of this moment, the collision of love and law, intimacy, and public scrutiny. Her plea sends a powerful message not just to the judge, but to the broader world, that someone intimately tied to Busfield believes wholly in his character and integrity. As the story continues to unfold through news reports, legal filings, and public discourse, the spotlight remains unrelenting. The veteran director faces serious allegations. The court system must parse fact from claim, and at the center of it all, Gilbert stands unwavering. The next hearings will test the intersection of justice, reputation, and loyalty, with the hearts of those closest to Busfield hanging in the balance. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.